excited to have you join us for this important webinar titled Alzheimer's, Dementia, and Communicating Effectively. In this webinar, we'll explore the unique communication challenges posed by Alzheimer's disease and dementia in emergency situations. We'll discuss best practices for engaging individuals living with dementia, focusing on strategies that emergency responders can use to provide clear, compassionate, and effective communication during a crisis. Topics will include understanding behavioral challenges, adapting communication techniques, and using practical approaches to reduce confusion and anxiety in people with cognitive impairments. The goal is to help community emergency response teams enhance their preparedness and improve interactions with individuals affected by Alzheimer's and dementia, ensuring better outcomes in emergencies. I would now like to introduce our guest speakers. Carolyn Duraco is Vice President of Programs and Education at the Alzheimer's Association Connecticut chapter. She has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Human Relations from St. Joseph's College, Long Island, New York, with a certificate in counseling and a certificate in human services. She has been employed at the Alzheimer's Association Connecticut chapter for over 18 years. She has over 20 years of experience as a therapeutic recreation director, working with individuals with dementia in a skilled nursing facility, and over 25 years experience as a support group leader, working with individuals diagnosed with dementia and their caregivers. She is a member of the Western Connecticut Area Agency on Aging Advisory Council and a former board member of the Connecticut Geriatric Society. Esther Pearl is the program manager for the Alzheimer's Association Connecticut chapter. She holds a Bachelor's of Science degree from Cornell University and a Master of Science degree from Central Connecticut State University. She has been with the Alzheimer's Association for 8 years and currently oversees the education programs for the state of Connecticut and the amazing volunteers who help present some of these programs. Having been a caregiver for her husband who lived with this disease, she has experienced firsthand the challenges of caregiving, of loving someone with cognitive decline, and the difficulties navigating healthcare, financial, and support systems. She is now able to turn those experiences into opportunities to help educate and support so many others who are facing their own challenges. Carolyn and Esther, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having us tonight. We're really excited to share this very important information with so many of you, not just here in Connecticut, but also all across the country. This is very exciting for us. And we wanted to share information with you, those of you who are protecting our communities. It's really important to know and understand what your constituents may be experiencing. We know, and we will tell you this up front, we have a lot to cover tonight. Most of our programs we only do for about an hour, but we felt there was so much really important information. We're going to do our best to squeeze it all in before 9 o'clock Eastern time. However, I just want to give you a heads up. If you find we're going pretty quickly, don't worry. Not only is the program being recorded, but a lot of this information you can also find through our website. And we'll go over that a little bit later, as well as through our 24-hour helpline. But we'll make sure you have all the information that you came here for tonight. So I wanted to share a little bit of a story with you, because here at the association, we like stories. Although mine wasn't really starting off as a wonderful story, but it does have some pretty good endings to it. My journey with Alzheimer's started in 2011 when my husband, Mark, was 56 and he was diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's. It came 1 year after we got married. It was a second marriage for both of us. And needless to say, it was pretty shocking and devastating when we received the diagnosis. For me, mostly because I had no idea that somebody so young could develop the disease. And so it really sent us into a world that we didn't know very much about. Actually, I didn't know very much. Mark did through his work, but it was all new to me. I like to share this picture because this was taken at our very first walk to end Alzheimer's that we went to here in Hartford, Connecticut. Not sure how many of you on the call tonight have been to a walk, but we do hold them all over the country. So no matter where you are, there is a walk nearby. My favorite part of the day is at the beginning. We call it the Promise Garden ceremony. And everybody who's at the walk gets one of these colored flowers with different colors representing different connections to the disease. So here you can see that Mark is holding a blue flower, which is for people living with the disease. We have yellow if you're a caregiver, orange if you're committed to our vision of a world without Alzheimer's and other dementia, and purple is if you've lost somebody. So every single person who's there gets a flower representing their connection. And we have one person representing each color come up on stage. We introduce them to the crowd, and then they're asked to hold their flower up high. And so this picture was taken as Mark was holding his flower up, his blue flower, and everybody else there with the blue flower was asked to raise their flower as well. And I know without a doubt that this is really the moment that Mark knew he was not alone. He knew he was surrounded by thousands of other people who were there in support of him and in support of everybody living with this disease and caring for somebody with the disease. And I love this picture because I think that emotion is so clearly expressed, and it really sums up a lot of what we do at the association. And if you notice on his flower, he had written, "Thank you to all, Mark." So that always makes me smile. So tonight, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about understanding dementia, Alzheimer's and dementia, and the 10 warning signs. It's really important that we are all on the same page with a very brief understanding as to what the disease is and what it isn't. We're going to talk about communication, behavior, safety. We're going to talk about driving and firearms, neglect and abuse, natural disasters, and fire response. And we're also going to talk about helping families. So just to give you a little background, this is every year we come up with our facts and figures. And seeing as we have people from all over the country, I wanted to share some national figures with you. I'm sorry, my screen is just being a little funny tonight. So our 24 facts and figures came out, and part of what we share is that nearly 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. That is, so 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or another dementia, and it kills more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. For those 7 million Americans living with Alzheimer's, there are over 11 million Americans who are providing unpaid care. So that is a lot of people. Between 2000 and 2021, deaths from heart disease have decreased 2.1%, while deaths from Alzheimer's has increased 141%. For those of you here in Connecticut, a little interesting fact is that the 80,000 people here in Connecticut who are living with Alzheimer's, and that is people who have been diagnosed and who are over the age of 65. So we've got that 80,000 people here in Connecticut, which is a little less than the entire population of Danbury. So just to put that in perspective for what we're talking about here in Connecticut. So let's take a little bit of a dive into Alzheimer's, understanding the disease and the 10 warning signs. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, it's important for us to go over a few definitions. So let me tell you a little bit about Alzheimer's, dementia, and what the difference is between the two words. So dementia is a general term for memory loss, thinking, language, problem solving, and other abilities to the point where it's severe enough to impact daily life. The most common reason why people have the symptoms of dementia is because of Alzheimer's disease. So dementia is not a single disease. It's not a diagnosis. It's an overall term. Um, and somewhere between 60 to 80% of the reason why people have dementia is because of Alzheimer's. So I'm going to play a couple of short videos from some of our experts at the association.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
It's important to know what the warning signs of Alzheimer's are and to be on the lookout. We know that we change over time, and the warning signs of Alzheimer's can be warning signs of a number of things, but when you see those in yourself or in someone you care about, it's important to check it out, to consult with a doctor, to find out what you're dealing with. Some of the things that can look like Alzheimer's may be other treatable conditions. If it is Alzheimer's, you still want to know as early as possible, because that gives the person and the family time to plan, time to make decisions, and it also gives the person with the disease a voice and allows them to say what they want.
Okay, so I'm going to just take a little break from the actual slides here for just a second and give a very, very quick overview of what Alzheimer's disease actually is. There are two main hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. There's a buildup of two different proteins in the brain. One of the buildup forms a barrier between neurons so that messages do not get through from one neuron to another. Different parts of the brain, this buildup happens, and it's like, there's a part of every town where you may be on your cell phone and all of a sudden you get to that part of town and you can't hear what people are saying, or people say to you, wait, hold on, go back, say that again. I didn't hear everything you said. I only caught every couple words. Why does that happen? It happens because somewhere between your phone and a cell phone tower and a satellite, maybe another satellite, another cell phone tower, another phone, there's a break in the signal. It's the same kind of thing that's happening inside the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's disease. There's a break in that signal. So the messages are not getting completely through. The second thing that happens is the buildup of another protein that it's a very sticky protein, and it causes the brain cells to die. The brain cells are not getting enough oxygen and they're not getting enough nutrients, and so they literally die. So those are really the two hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. You can see on this slide that different parts of the brain are responsible for different functions. So for example, we have the frontal lobe, which is problem solving, our emotional traits, our reasoning. We've got the temporal lobe, which is how we understand language and behavior. Much of our memory is there. The parietal lobe has to do with sensations, our ability to read, our body orientation, how we are in space. Occipital lobe has to do with vision. And then, as Dr. Creo mentioned, the disease will eventually progress to somebody's brainstem, which are the involuntary parts of our functioning. So, quick trivia question. How much, on average, would you say an adult brain weighs? Not the skull, not the fluids and all that other stuff, just the brain. I'd like you to throw something into the chat and let's see what people are thinking. So how much do you think an adult human brain weighs? Oh,
So
look
I
at
got
that. The
two
first
answers, Esther, 3 pounds on the first two answers.
Perfect. Exactly right. On average, an adult human brain weighs about 3 pounds. Now, given what I just told you about what happens in the brain of somebody with Alzheimer's, what would you say the weight is of a brain of somebody who lived with severe Alzheimer's disease? See if anybody can get that in the chat.
We have 3 pounds, 7 pounds, 5 pounds.
So after Alzheimer's.
And 1 pound, 2 pounds.
Okay, so now we're a lot closer. It's about 1.5 pounds. If you look at this next slide of a cross section of a brain, you can see on the left side, this is a nice, healthy looking brain. You can see it's pretty full. It's very healthy. If you look at the right side, you can see a lot of differences. You can see it's a lot smaller. It doesn't take up the whole skull area. You can see dark areas here. Those are where the brain cells, the neurons, have actually died. So this part here, right in the middle that's dark, that is where the hippocampus is. Hippocampus is where we store our short-term memories, and it's typically the first part of the brain that is impacted by Alzheimer's disease. So when you think about coming across somebody who is sitting at a picnic table at the town picnic with an empty plate of food, some crumbs, a couple of French fries left over, and they say, "No, I haven't eaten lunch yet." How can that be? You can see the plate, you see the evidence of it, because that part of the brain right there, the hippocampus, is already impacted by the disease. Okay. So moving on. Trivia question. Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process. True or false? Well, unfortunately, I can't have 84 people all unmute and answer. So I'm going to tell you the answer is false. Alzheimer's is a brain disease that causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. It is not a normal part of aging. So the next question would be, and I already gave you the answer to this one, people younger than age 65 can get Alzheimer's. Well, we know that's true. Although it's less common, people younger than 65 can also develop Alzheimer's. So what are some of the risk factors? Well, there's a lot we know about the brain, a lot that we don't. So let me ask you, what do you think is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? Do you think it's genetics, family history, or age? Let's have a couple of entries into the chat and see what people are thinking.
I have some genetics. One of them?
Genetics, family history, or age?
Yep, I have genetics a few times, age. family history. It's a little bit of a mix, Esther.
Okay. So the correct answer here is age. So the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease is age. Although Alzheimer's is not part of normal aging, age is the greatest risk factor for the disease. After age 65, the risk of Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years, and 34% of people age 85 and older have Alzheimer's. Okay. Populations at a higher risk. We do know that Black Americans are about twice as likely as white Americans to have Alzheimer's disease or another dementia. We know that Hispanic Americans are 1.5 times as likely to have the disease as white Americans. And we know that almost 2/3 of Americans living with Alzheimer's are women. When it comes to understanding the progression of Alzheimer's disease, there are 3 major parts of a continuum. The first part is actually the asymptomatic part. This is before there are any visible symptoms of the disease, but there are changes in the biology of the brain. Because of the development of technology, we can now see changes occurring in the brain anywhere from 10 to 20 years before there are any visible symptoms. So that would be the asymptomatic stage on the continuum. There's no visible symptoms. Nobody has any reason to think there's anything going on, but there are biological changes happening in the brain. The next stage is MCI due to Alzheimer's disease. MCI stands for mild cognitive impairment. If anybody watched This Is Us over the last couple of years, you'll know very well about MCI and the impact that it has on people. These are the beginning stages of cognitive loss. It is where people start having some symptoms, but not severe enough to interfere with daily life. We then move into the dementia due to Alzheimer's disease stage, which is then further broken down into 3 parts. The first part is mild, so similar to MCI, some symptoms, however, they are now severe enough to interfere with daily life. The moderate stage, which is more pronounced, where many activities of daily living are impacted, and then the severe stage where most activities of daily living become impacted. And in a few minutes, Carolyn's going to go through the 10 warning signs, which are typically things that happen here between the MCI and the mild stage. I've got a couple of short videos from people who are living in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, and I always think it's so interesting to hear what they say and how they say it in terms of their own experiences living with the disease.
I'm like an overachiever and when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. You know, I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life. You know, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive, and I'm finding that I'm forgetting more. And they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor's, and so that becomes a little disconcerting at times, to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
So I hope you found those statements as powerful as I have. I see that there's a question in the chat about the continuum slide and a typical time frame for each stage. So overall, we say that on average, people may live anywhere from 3 to 10 years after diagnosis. However, some people live as long as 20. Some people don't live 3. Depends on comorbidities. There's a lot that it probably depends on that we don't really know yet. We're working on it in terms of the science. But some people will decline, sort of a slow and steady decline like that. Other people may have a quick decline and then plateau, and then a quick decline and plateau. And there's not really much way to predict it or to know. It's just one of the very many frustrating and challenging parts of caring for somebody with the disease. There's no really law of averages, I guess you could say. So I want to very briefly go through treatment, because there has been a lot of very exciting news these past couple years. We are now, for the first time ever, in an era of treatment. What I mean by that is, a couple minutes ago when we were talking about what Alzheimer's is, we talked about the different proteins that clump, that get stuck in the brain. And the medications now are targeting those protein buildups. And so it's the first time that we can really say they're changing the underlying pathology of the disease. They are not a cure. They can't stop the progression, but what they do is, by clearing some of these proteins, they can delay the progression, which in essence gives people more time to enjoy life, more time with their families, more time to experience, more time perhaps to get involved in a clinical trial. Okay, so a little hope for the
This is an
future.
incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease as a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day. And I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
Okay.
It's nice to see.
Participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
You might hear the phrase negative trial, which means it didn't hit the endpoint. It didn't result in an FDA-approved treatment for the disease. But I think the only negative trial is one that doesn't provide us with valuable information. If the trial is well designed and is a good scientific experiment, we can get extremely valuable data that can help plan the next trial and make it even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even prevention.
Okay.
By participating in clinical...
All right, so I am now going to turn it over to Carolyn to talk about the 10 warning signs.
Great. Again, good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for all the work that you do to keep our communities safe. And thank you for caring about this important topic tonight. So as Esther shared, we always like to share the pictures of the brain so that you have an understanding of what's happening. I have had the honor to work with people living with a diagnosis in the early stage. The youngest in my group was 49. So the examples that I'm going to share with you, again, you could read the curriculum, all of the programs that we have. You can also go back and learn online. But I'm going to give you specific examples that they've shared with me with some of the signs that they've noticed in their loved one. Again, when we think about the 10 warning signs, you don't have to have all 10. It could be having a few of these. And I think what's important, as one of our speakers in the video has shared earlier, is to get a diagnosis because you don't want to miss something that can be reversed. In other words, someone could have those signs of dementia. Remember, Esther shared it's not a diagnosis, it's a group of symptoms. Alzheimer's disease is the #1 cause, but somebody could have dementia-like symptoms, but it could be caused by something reversible. So, for example, if somebody had problems with their thyroid, they could become confused, disoriented, poor memory, but it's because they have a thyroid disease, a condition that can be treated. Someone may have a vitamin deficiency, specifically B12. They become foggy, confused, disoriented, poor memory, but they need B12 shots. So we always want to make sure that we talk to our doctors about what we are seeing so that we don't miss something that is reversible. What I'm going to talk to you about is those warning signs. The first one is memory loss that disrupts daily life. And the key here with Alzheimer's, and Esther showed you the slide, it's forgetting new information. So, it's one of the most common ones, and it's not typical age related. So here's an example of, you may can't remember where you parked your car, right? But you remember that you did drive your car to the store. That's very different, right? Someone who may not remember, did I take the bus? Did I go with a friend? That's really disrupting life, right? So it's memory loss that's disrupting life. Not remembering how to get to work. Again, that was an example someone shared. We're in the same field for many years. One day was driving to work, couldn't remember how to get there. That's now disrupting daily life. So that's very different than a normal age-related change where you forget a date or an appointment once in a while. So that's very different. So that's the first one. The second one is changes in planning or solving problems. As Esther showed you the picture of the brain, right? Often people think with Alzheimer's disease is just memory loss, but this is a disease that affects so many different parts of the brain. So problems in challenges in problem solving, maybe doing a recipe. Again, in the example I'm going to share is a gentleman who said he was in the corporate world and he went back to his desk to write the minutes of the meeting that he just attended, and he couldn't do that. So being able to do the minutes of his meeting couldn't solve that problem. Or a tip. I've had many family members say at a restaurant, they've noticed their husband always did the tip and now can't figure out that calculation. Again, that's something similar that the gentleman in the video shared earlier. That's very different than, occasional, misdoing a checkbook and making an error here or there. The next one is difficulty completing familiar tasks. The key word here is familiar. So this is not where I just got a brand new iPhone. It took me forever to kind of learn the new system. I thought very challenging, but this is something that was familiar. So again, I'm going to share examples in my group, in my support group. I remember a woman shared with me that her husband always wore a suit to work for 27 years. And she said she remembers the day he walked out of the bathroom and said to his wife, he said, honey, I can't tie my tie. That was a familiar task that he couldn't figure out how to do any longer. Okay. That's something that really stuck out. Again, driving to different locations, organizing a grocery list, a familiar recipe, maybe somebody that always cooked your favorite recipe and now it's tasting different, right? Something is missing, and that was a familiar task. Another example, my colleague shared her mother always loved coffee. Mom was always making coffee, and now all of a sudden mom's making tea. Well, what happened, this was before the Keurigs, right? What happened was making a pot of coffee became too complex, too many tasks. She couldn't figure out all those steps. So she just started making tea. So that familiar task of making a pot of coffee became difficult. The fourth is confusion with time and place. So this one I want to share a couple of different thoughts here. So when we think about time and place, it could be absolutely somebody, and we're going to show you some videos in a moment where they're living in a different place in time. Maybe they're looking for their home when they were 20 years old and they're 85, right? But it also is, and someone shared with me, her name was Jerry, and she said to me one evening, and I was in a group with her, she said, you know what, Carolyn? She said, I don't have a clock. I said, Jerry, what do you mean? And she said, I don't have a clock. I know you told me something, but whether you told me it 20 minutes ago, 2 years ago, that passage of time I can't calculate. And the reason I'm sharing with you this on this particular training is sometimes when we're in a situation with a disaster, an emergency, and we tell somebody to wait right there, I'll be there in a moment. To understand that their understanding, their cognitive ability to know that passage of time could be damaged. So they maybe feel like they're sitting there for 2 hours and it's literally been a few moments. So that's a cognitive ability that can be challenged. So again, that confusion with time and place could be looking for your home when you were younger, or it could be understanding that passage of time and how long have I been here. The next one, number 5, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Again, so this is not like 20/20 vision. This is what I talk about depth perception. Driving will become difficult. How far away is that garage door, right? Balance. We see increased falls. How far away is the toilet seat? Maybe going to rescue people in their homes after a fall. You and I take for granted that we know when we sit down how far away that seat is. Again, someone in my group shared with me, she was one of the younger women, she was in her 40s, and she called me and she said she had just broken her nose. And she said, you know what, I keep falling down the curbs. I can't judge, I think it's flat. So she would be tripping down the curbs because it's that depth perception, that spatial relationship. When Esther and I do a training, I'm going to have you all do this. I know it's recorded, but we're not going to put a poster. But if you do this, I want you all to do this, that some of you who are on, and without moving your neck, if you look to the right, you see your hand. You look to the left, you see your hand. And if you look down, you see your hand. Often that's the type of vision someone with dementia may have, right? So it's very hard for them to see peripheral around them. So why is that important? When you approach somebody, we want to approach from the front so that they're seeing us. To come from the side can be alarming and scary, and they may lash out just because of an instinctual fear that something's coming towards them. We also know with the visual spatial that reading could become difficult, struggling with vocabulary and things like that as well. So number 6, new problems with words in speaking or writing. So again, the 4 people that you heard in the videos, they all spoke very well, right? I mean, we probably wouldn't suspect that they had a diagnosis. I was at a conference recently, and I was at a table with people living with a diagnosis, and this woman was speaking beautifully. I didn't know she was diagnosed. And I said, you're speaking eloquently. And she said, but I am exhausted. She said, the amount of time and energy it's taking me to speak clearly to you, she said, you have no idea. So that ability to listen to my words, to think about the right word to respond, and to give that response can be difficult. So we see people struggling to find words, as a gentleman on the video earlier. They may misuse words. And I often say they may use descriptive words. If they can't think of the right word, they may say, so for example, a watch, they may say, it's a hand clock. It's a clock, it's on my hand, I can't think of the word. So you may find the person is using descriptive language because they can't think of the right word. This would happen often. So this is very different than you and I, who can't think of the name of an actor and we remember at 3 a.m, right? Or we can't think of the name of a song. It comes back to us later. And it happens not as often. With somebody with Alzheimer's, these problems with word finding in speaking and writing happen more often. And they struggle with that vocabulary. And also their train of thought, right? As they're speaking, they may lose their train of thought when speaking in a group or even just one-on-one with someone.
The other thing.
Number 7, I know all of us, if we were here, would raise our hand if we've misplaced things. Yes, right? And recently, someone left because I was looking for my phone as I was talking to them on the phone. We all have done that. Here's the key here. If you notice in this slide, it's misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace your step. That's very different. So if I left my pocketbook, I thought I left it in the car and I don't want to go outside, it's too cold to go get it, right? I can remember, oh yes, I had too many groceries, I left my pocketbook in the car. Someone with Alzheimer's, it may just be missing and they cannot retrace what they just did previously to find that object. Sometimes it becomes difficult with caregivers and family members because they may accuse somebody of stealing, right? Because they can't figure out where that item is and you must have taken it. Okay, so it's very different than misplacing things from time to time. We're able to retrace our steps and think about, okay, where was I? Where did I maybe leave it? I was rushing in the house. I put my keys on the table. Very different than somebody who cannot retrace those steps. Okay. Number 8. So again, it's not just memory loss, it's problems with planning, thinking, but also judgment is decreased or poor at this point, right? So this could be somebody, again, many of you mentioned wandering when you did the polling. This may be seeing somebody on a 90-degree day. This is a true helpline call that we had. A wife called, her husband was wandering up and down the road. It was 90 degrees. He had a coat, a scarf, a hat, boots, gloves, and she could not get him back in the house, right? So that was a really dangerous situation using poor judgment. This could also be somebody that you're seeing making some poor judgment with their money, right? Again, another example I like to share is a family member shared that their mother used to always deposit her Social Security check. All of a sudden, she goes to the bank one afternoon and wants all the money withdrawn. Poor judgment, right? So again, we have to really be careful of those scammers and telemarketers that can take advantage of somebody that's having some cognitive issues and some judgment issues. Number 9 is withdrawal from work or social activities. We want to make sure we're not misunderstanding this as depression. Sometimes someone may have a dual diagnosis of dementia and depression is treatable. But we often see the person may stop going to the baseball game or the football game or the hockey game because they can't follow along. They might stop going to bingo because they can't follow along. My aunt stopped going to church. She couldn't remember who everyone was. She couldn't follow along with the readings. So sometimes people start to withdraw. It may be the person at work who's not taking that promotion that normally would have taken that promotion. Okay, so again, we want to make sure, I think as a community, one of the things Esther and I really, in our association, really works hard to try to make sure that we include people in the community so that they don't withdraw, because socialization is very important. I'm going to share a story of my friend Bill, who was in my group. He was diagnosed at 57. He loved golf. And and he was at the point where he wasn't really driving any longer, and his friend picked him up from golf, and he was going to stop playing for a while. But he realized he's just going to talk to his friend, because what happened, he physically could still play golf, but he couldn't figure out keeping score. So he just said to his buddy, you know what, I'm going to keep playing golf with you, but you have to keep score for me. So he was still engaged in the community. And I think that's something that's really important, that we want to start thinking about, keeping people engaged, and making sure that they're not withdrawing from our community. The last one, and I think could be sometimes the most difficult for families, is changes in mood and personality. Again, the person can become confused, suspicious. If you're not sure who you're with or who you're talking to or where you are, you become fearful and anxious, right? So if you think about situations, if you're not sure what you're supposed to do next or how you're getting home, that could definitely increase some anxiety. So we see that there's some changes in mood, or if they're frustrated and they can't do anything any longer. Again, I'm going to share, I like to share stories of real scenarios where I had a gentleman, again, I worked in a nursing home for many, many years on a dementia unit. And we had this gentleman who no one really believed he had dementia. He looked very healthy, and they couldn't understand. I had worked with the family for quite a while. And that evening he said to the nurses, he said, oh, I'll help turn all the lights out. It was getting time for everyone to go into bed. And instead of flicking the switch for the lights, he went in and he switched all the light bulbs, turned all the light bulbs. That was his cognitive ability to shut the lights off. He didn't think that he could just shut the switch. And they realized, okay, something else is going on, right? So again, he became frustrated, not knowing how to do some things. So we definitely see some of those changes in personality and in mood. So just a really important, Esther, if you want to show the slide on, if you have these signs, what do you do next? What are some things that are important?
It's a very interesting phenomenon that people who have memory problems are often less aware of it than family members or their friends who know them well. One of the reasons for that is our ability to monitor ourselves, which is an important part of brain function, decreases when we start having memory problems. Not in everybody, but commonly, and more than half the people with memory problems. And so the person is just not keeping track of the trouble they're having day to day. But the family members are, paying attention. If they're paying attention, they see, boy, this is starting to happen a lot, and the person's not aware of it. So the family's more aware, and they may talk to their loved one about it, and they say, I've noticed you've been repeating yourself. And they say, I'm not repeating myself. And that could either be due to the fact that they're not aware of it, or they may not want to acknowledge it.
Yeah. Again, so not everyone has the insight. Again, the people I spoke to you about are people in my group who are aware they have the disease, but not everyone has that cognitive ability to have that insight. And a lot of times, what is the family talking about? What is the family noticing? It could be a neighbor that's noticing. It could be people at work that are noticing the changes. So what's important to assess the situation? Esther, if you want to go through the steps, I'll go through them very quickly. So you want to pay attention. So what changes are you seeing? And again, it's not just memory. Are the changes that you're seeing in thinking or in behavior as well, not just that memory loss? Step 2, what else is going on? Are you seeing wandering? Are you seeing some agitation, problems with language and word finding? What else are you seeing going on with that individual? Again, you're going to learn about those 10 signs, which we just went over. And then think about, has anyone else noticed it? Sometimes you are so dear to that person, you may not notice those changes, but someone who hasn't seen them in a while may notice those changes. Again, is it a neighbor? Is it somebody in their bridge club that's noticing they can't keep up with the game any longer? Is it somebody at work? Have they been in several accidents? We talk about that depth perception. Are their side view mirrors dented? Is there white paint on their hood because they're going too close to the garage? So what else have you noticed, and who else may have noticed some things? And then you want to have conversations. And you want to think about who should have those conversations. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Think Think about the best time, usually early morning, later at night would be hard to have a conversation. Some of you may know the term sundowning, where somebody becomes more confused in the later part of the evening. So we'd want to have that in a quiet place earlier on in the day to have that conversation. And then you want to think, almost practice the conversation with somebody. What is it that you're noticing? And instead of just saying something like, I'm noticing some memory problems, to really be concrete, to say, I'm noticing, Mom, that you're saying the same story over and over again. Or I'm noticing that you're paying your bills several times, or you're asking me that same question over and over. To be specific so they understand what it is that you're concerned with. Offer to go to the doctor. Again, this is really important, that somebody with memory problems should not be going to the doctor alone. In 15 minutes, right, they can present very, very well. So what is the family seeing? And then this way you're another set of ears to help that person digest what the doctor is saying and what those reports are revealing. Again, having many conversations with loved ones, families, and again, as Esther and I shared, hopefully you know that the Alzheimer's Association is here to help you through this whole journey. We're going to give you lots of resources to share out in the community as you're helping people who may not know that we're here. Seeing a doctor, again, very important. And what type of doctor would you see? Again, we have trainings. We're going to skip through this one, Esther. Just looking at the importance of early detection, mentioning that you can get into trials early, planning for the future, making those decisions and having a say in some of the things that you want to participate in your future decision making. And here's a list of different doctors. Again, the Alzheimer's Association, we have our community resource finder that has lists of doctors, but they can be a geriatrician, neurologist, neuropsychologist, psychiatrist, psychologist. A lot of times our primary care may be one of the first doctors to notice some changes. And there's a question, just I'm going to answer in the chat. If we see these signs, how do we approach with them? I think really important, sometimes, again, so our 24-hour helpline is always here to help you with navigation and having conversation. A lot of times it's sharing with somebody that you're noticing some changes and you want to make sure it's nothing that can be corrected or prevented, or making sure their medications are correct, their vitamins are correct, and making sure that you'll offer to go with them to the doctor that you're concerned. So it's having that conversation, that you'll go with them, sometimes attaching the visit to the doctor with going out to lunch, a fun activity sometimes is important. And also letting people know that a lot of people don't realize that we have, Medicare has an annual wellness visit that's covered, that we check everything else. We check our heart, right? We have all our other routine checks. We should be checking our brains and doing cognitive assessments to see what our baseline is. And these are covered through our Medicare annual wellness visit. So hopefully I answered that question for you. Okay, so there is currently no way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. Is that true or false? I'm going to have Esther put that right on the screen for us. So right now, we can pretty much accurately diagnose somebody with Alzheimer's or related dementia. Many years ago when I first started here, it was only upon autopsy, but it is not one single test. It's a series of tests, MRIs, CAT scans, actually PET scans today, looking at some blood work, doing an overall health check, doing cognitive assessments, many cognitive exams. So it's a series of tests to get a diagnosis. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes there's dementia symptoms that are not Alzheimer's disease. And also just to bring to your attention, we're finding more that it's more common than not to have what we call a mixed dementia. So you may have Alzheimer's disease with a vascular dementia, strokes, or Lewy body dementia where there's a Lewy body protein. So very often someone may have what's called a mixed dementia, not solely just Alzheimer's disease. Okay, any questions on that? I know we're covering a lot of this information pretty quickly, but we're going to go through now looking at, we like to teach, what's happening with the brain? What are some of the signs? But then how now are we going to best communicate looking at behavior and safety? Let me see what there's a question here in the chat. Let's just answer that before we. What tests should be done to identify early biological markers that could be slowed down or prevented? So again, there's many clinical trials that people can go into, but also today there's PET scans that can show the amyloid plaque in the brain. Some people also have a spinal tap done to show the amyloid plaque. Again, it's not just one test to show that you have this disease. Doing many cognitive assessments, also looking genetically. We know there's some genetic, there's an APOE gene that becomes a risk gene that is looked at as well. So looking at genetics, PET scans, other health factors, many different tests that are done. And the next question, let me answer that one. I have a customer in two.
Carolyn, I can answer the next question that came in if you want to
yeah,
do the one about the store. But there was another question Patrick asked, if somebody is diagnosed, do they automatically lose their driver's license? And the answer is no, it is not an automatically day you're diagnosed, you lose your license. It can be a very gradual loss of abilities. Based on experience, it usually comes down to when the person diagnosed and their families have that conversation, which can be a very, very challenging conversation. I know a lot of people have asked to have a medical professional involved with saying, no, you can't drive. My experience is that many medical professionals are very reluctant to make that statement. And the way several have explained it to me is that they may have spent years or decades building up trust with a patient, building up a relationship with that patient. And the concern is by mandating to somebody that they stop driving, you've in essence ruined that that trust and that relationship. And so I have to say that a lot of people are hesitant to go down that road of mandating.
We have a whole section on our website about driving, having that conversation, because we do know somebody will lose the ability to drive, not only because of depth perception, but wandering. You can get very far in a car, reflexes, vision, all of these things. So again, we have a whole training right on our website specifically just on driving.
Okay. I'm going to go on with the communication. I know there are a couple of other questions that have come in. We'll do our best to get back to everything before we end tonight. We do have quite a bit more we want to get to that's a little bit more specific now in terms of your roles and a little less focused on the actual progression of the disease. So when it comes to behaviors, one of the things that we always say to people, whether it's families or professionals, is to remember that behavior is always a form of communication. So if somebody is physically acting something out, it's because they need you to understand something that they may not have the words for. So a few things to remember about the way the disease impacts somebody's ability to communicate is, first of all, details are going to become very overwhelming. If there's an emergency situation or something traumatic has happened, they may have difficulty not just remembering what's important, they may focus on a small detail that is not as relevant as other information. They may have difficulty coming up with words. They may have challenges expressing what they're feeling. And they also may start to have a lack of insight. One of the videos we showed earlier was Dr. Soloway talking about how very often people are not aware of how much they're being impacted by the disease. So somebody may say, no, I'm perfectly fine. And yet it's the middle of the winter and they're outside in a bathrobe with no slippers, lost, and they may want to just keep walking and get themselves home. They may insist that they're perfectly fine. They may suffer from illusions, delusions, and hallucinations. And their response to your body language may become even more pronounced than before the cognitive changes happened. So, how does Alzheimer's affect someone's ability to communicate? Well, a lot of information, and again, especially in an emergency situation where there are a lot of people, there may be a lot of lights, there may be a lot of things happening all at one time, sort of gets that fight or flight reflex going. And so people will have difficulty following what's going on. So suggestions are explaining one thing at a time, one step at a time. Less information can be better because too much detail kind of gets lost. Really focus on what's most important. Remember that people will often revert back to a native language. So if they spoke another language growing up and into young adulthood and then learned English, as the disease progresses, they're likely to go back to their native language. Signs may not always make sense. So if somebody is holding up a stop sign for people crossing the road, somebody may see it, but really not remember that that red sign means stop. We want to make sure we give people time to respond, especially in an emergency situation, but even in our everyday lives, we don't take time to stop and listen. One thing to remember is that it can very easily take somebody 30 seconds or more to hear a question, to process it, to think of an answer, find the words, and then start speaking. That can feel like a really, really long time for us, especially when it's in an emergency situation. So if you can help that communication, keeping it simple, keeping it straightforward, trying to keep it slow, one thing at a time. If it's possible to get somebody to a quiet area, to a place where there's much less commotion going on, it'll be much easier for them to understand what it is you're trying to communicate and for them to communicate. Okay, Carolyn, you want to talk about wandering?
So again, we know that 6 out of 10 people diagnosed will, and the word is will wander, not even may wander. So again, 60% of people will wander with dementia. And I want to think of wandering not only on foot, but it could be somebody in a car. It could be somebody that always went to work on the train or in the bus. We've had somebody, there was somebody recently, she was a nurse for many, many years, was retired probably 10 years. And this one morning she woke up and showed up on top on the nurse's unit, ready to work. Took the train there. Just she thought she was working that day. We do consider wandering somebody with dementia as an emergency situation. We know that if they're not found within 24 hours, 50% of people risk very serious injury or death. So this is really an emergency that needs to be taken care of immediately as soon as possible. And again, it can happen not only on foot, but in the car, on a train, on a bus. So there's some talk tactics. So part of the training that Esther and I put together, this is part of our first responder training. This is actually online. All first responders can watch this training. We took different clips from it for today's presentation. But what are the talk tactics? We want to take it slow. Not like how Esther and I are speaking tonight, trying to cover everything, but somebody with dementia needs us to slow down. In my group, I was asking them if they had to write slogans on a shirt. What does the world need to know? And somebody wrote, "Slow down, you move too fast." Right? So we need to slow down our conversations, limit words to very few words. We want to ask simple questions, one at a time. Limit reality checks. What do I mean by that? So we have to enter into their reality, right? If somebody is thinking they're going home to their parents' home, we're not going to argue with them and check in and say, do you know what day it is? Do you know what time it is? We want to enter into their reality, get a trust with them, become their friend so that they'll follow us and listen to our direction. And we also want to keep eye contact. Why is that important? Esther just shared about the importance of body language, and every behavior is a form of communication. So if they're not understanding language, they may possibly much better understand a cue. So if you're waving them on or asking them to sit down or put on their jacket, right? By cueing them visually, that's going to be much more helpful than verbally saying something to them. To go sit down, right, wait right there, I'll be there. But we need to give them direction and cueing. They're going to read our body language, so we need to be giving them eye contact so they can see in front of us. To yell to somebody behind, they may run because they just hear this noise and become fearful. So we want to speak slowly, ask simple questions, limit those reality checks, and keeping eye contact so that they can see our body language. So we're going to show you some examples. Again, this is not Hollywood. These are, some dramatizations, but we're going to pick out some important things in here about wandering, and I want you to pay attention to the approach of the officer or the first responder.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Officer Alonzo. Going for a walk today?
I'm looking for my brother.
Is your name Mr. Wheeler?
Yes?
Mr. Wheeler, your daughter's very worried about you.
I don't have a daughter.
I believe her name is Molly Majors.
Oh, Molly. Yes, yes.
Would you like to go see her?
Okay.
How about I give you a ride? We'll go see Molly.
You're taking me to
We'll go see Molly.
Good. Thank you,
You're
officer.
welcome. You're welcome.
I've been lost, but I was looking for my brother.
Oh, that's
So I know this is a very simple scene here, but I just want to bring some points out. So just the gentleman who's walking, paying attention to his gait, right? His gait was a little bit off. Just where he was in space on the road, near the railroad tracks, it's really not a path. So even just that clue right away that looked like somebody who was wandering. One of the things I think the approaches of the officer, it was a very gentle approach, a very non-threatening approach. And we always say we don't want to argue with somebody with dementia. So even though when he says, I don't have a sister, a daughter, right? He didn't argue and say, yes, you do. He said, I believe her name is Molly. And that triggered that memory for the person. So not arguing with the person, that gentle, slow approach, and that distance, right? Really important because he was able to connect with a name. So anytime if you're in an emergency situation, you know something about the person, even if they're wearing a Yankee hat, you'd say, oh, I know that you love the Yankees. You need a way to connect with them so they have this trust, because somebody with dementia may not have even recognized that uniform and what did that stand for, but that somebody was there to help them. So again, just that gentle approach, and recognizing that person looked like he was wandering. I had somebody recently, it was raining out and they had an umbrella, but the umbrella wasn't open and they were on the wrong side of the road. And the scenario just didn't look right. I didn't know to put the umbrella up, that judgment when it was pouring rain, even though they had it in their hand. And that was a clue to me that something wasn't right with that person wandering. Okay. So again, when we recognize a person living with dementia, so again, we know age is the number one risk factor. So that gentleman in the video was older, right? His facial expression, if you think about his facial expression, a little concerning, a little bewildered, not really sure where to go. His attire was appropriate, I think there. His gait was a little off. Sometimes someone may look like they're intoxicated. And again, his action, just being on that road in the middle, was just not the safe place to be. So I think that was a really good observation that the police officer thought this person needed some help. Any questions on that, or anyone have a scenario that was similar? Many of you mentioned in the call today that you have been in contact with somebody who was wandering with dementia and what that approach may have seemed like. Does anyone want to share? You can feel free to come off mute if you want. Okay. All right. So again, this is not Hollywood, but again, another dramatization here. Just let's think about the approach of the officer.
Can I add one thing for you, Carolyn?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is Don Sowers from Volunteer Tennessee. Hey, I used to be a cop for 10 years back in Santa Monica, California, and we had a number of people that were wandering, and we started a local program to make sure that they were wearing some type of identification other than a hospital tag type of identification. Because, a lot of them looked at that and just said, cut it off immediately type of thing. I don't want that on there. But I would urge anyone with family members or no, if anyone who knows of someone who is suffering from dementia or specifically Alzheimer's, that they get some form of identification, whether it be a bracelet or something that they can wear or have, that if they do, walk away. One of the tough things for us was I remember a number of times I would pick someone up that just like that video, but I hadn't received any information ahead of time as
Right.
to who they were. And so try to get that out ahead of time or set something up ahead of time so that people can be identified.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. So, so important. We're going to cover a slide. In Connecticut, we have what we call a Bring Me Back Home program. But I always encourage all families, and please do this. You may be the only person in the community to share this, to register the person with the local police or fire EMTs. Let them know that somebody in your home is living with cognitive decline, some memory concerns. Again, they may know, just like you said, Don, they may not know their correct name. They may use their name, their maiden name. They're using an address from years ago. So if they're in a registry, it helps the first responder know their correct name, their caregiver, any medications, any specific behaviors. So thank you so much. We will cover that, but so, so important. I appreciate you. And thank you for all the work that you do.
Oh, no worries. And you can also share a photograph of your loved one as well with like Smart 911 or one of those registries as well, which is very helpful to law enforcement.
Yes, and we always will talk to the families about a recent photo, right, to make sure it's current. And the reason I share that is we had a gentleman who was wandering. His photo had a very thick head of hair. He always used to wear a toupee, but in his dementia, he would forget to put it on. So now a very different looking man is wandering. So again, a recent photo. So thank you so much for sharing, and we'll cover that a little bit later. Thank you. Okay, here's another scenario.
Oh, you want
we can skip that. We can skip that one, Esther. Yeah, I think we covered that. Again, here's our 1-800 number. Again, 24 hours a day, you can call us with any questions on wandering, or even there's some things like to think about what may be a precursor for somebody wandering, somebody that's talking about their past job, or all of a sudden looking for their car, looking out the window. There can be some red flags that this person might be at risk of wandering. So some helpful hints. Again, always remaining calm. Somebody with dementia, when Esther and I do another training, we talk about the amygdala part of the brain that deals with emotion. We know people with dementia are emotional. They feel emotional. They have emotion. They can read your emotions. So you need to be calm. A lot of what you're going to do is just offering that reassurance and that support, giving them your name and naming them. So important. I know it sounds simple, but to say, Betty, hi, it's Carolyn. I'm here to help you. Betty may have no idea who I am, but I named her. So she may think we're friends somehow. So really important to give the person your name and their name. Again, as Esther mentioned, limit distractions, overstimulation, the person may hide. We want to join the person in their reality. They're going to work. Okay, well, you probably maybe assess that they're probably not working, but you're going to say, so tell me about your work. We often find, again, in that registry, Don, that we mentioned, where did the person used to work? So if somebody was wandering, we had someone recently that showed up in front of the gas station. He worked for years waiting for the gas station to open, right? So if we know where they used to work, what were their habits, where did they used to go, that information is really important. We need to pay attention to their emotional and nonverbal communication. Again, every behavior is a form of communication. What are they trying to share with us? What do we mean here? Consider stretching the truth. It may be engage or comfort them. Oh, you work as a machinist. My father was a machinist. What did you make? So having that conversation rather than if you argue with someone and say, you can't be a machinist. You look like you're 85 years old. I'm sure you've retired many years ago. That is not going to be a good situation. So we're going to enter into their reality, become their friend, have that conversation so we get that trust so they'll follow some of our direction. Again, other helpful hints, don't try to reason or explain. Again, This is the disease of cognition. So we want to focus on feelings, not facts. How is that person feeling right now? They're lost, they're confused. To tell them what year it is, how old are they, that's not going to be as helpful as how are they feeling. They're feeling unsafe, they're scared. So you to reassure them, you're there to help them, you are a friend. If they become agitated, you want to try not to take those accusations personally. They may not, again, recognize you. They may not recognize a uniform. And then avoiding the word no. I know, again, sometimes in emergency, you may need to say that. But generally, when we talk about behaviors with people with dementia, no, don't, can't, those words sometimes can increase agitation. So what I want you to try to do, and I know it's hard, it takes practice, focus on what you want them to do. So say they're in a shelter and you don't want them to go out that exit door. So instead of saying, no, don't go out that door, you want to focus on, come here with me in the kitchen. Focus on what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. And sometimes that helps that transition and them following you become a little more easily done. If somebody is missing, what are some immediate search tips that we teach first responders? You're going to check the immediate area, prior residence or workplaces, so knowing where they worked. Usually it's a very short distance from the road. Smart, not loud. What do we mean by that? To yell at somebody, they may get scared and move faster and then hide. The pinball effect, what does that mean? I know it's hard when I'm in class, I could kind of give you an example. So a pinball effect, so someone may go to a gate, the gate's locked. Cognitively, they're probably not gonna be able to figure it out. So they might bounce back and go do the pinball effect. Go to something and pinball effect. And the other thing is, again, it doesn't always work 100%, but it's a good opportunity to think about the dominant hand theory. If somebody's right-handed, they're more apt to make rights than lefts. Again, just something that can help in a search more quickly. Transporting a person with dementia, again, if moving a person to an unfamiliar setting, such as an emergency room, again, the noise and chaos may increase that agitation. So I always say this when I teach, never underestimate the value of your presence. Your calming presence with somebody can mean the world, letting them know that you're a friend, maybe holding their hand, that they're safe with you, is so, so important. That one-on-one instruction, simple, short sentences, one direction at a time. They can't follow. I'm going to do my socks story, Esther, that I tell every training. A gentleman who said to me, he was 64 years old, had dementia, and he said, I go upstairs and I get my black socks. He says, I can get my black socks. I know they're in my top drawer. He goes upstairs, ready to get his black socks, and his wife yells, honey, can you grab my white sweater? And he said to me, he says, Carol, I couldn't do anything. I froze. That was too much information. And this is somebody in the early stage, right? So I teach that to you and I share that with you because I think we need to remember to slow down and give that one task at a time so they can keep following us and not become overwhelmed and overstimulated. We need to watch the person at all times. Again, especially if a noisy, chaotic situation, they may hide and wander in fear of not knowing who everyone is and becoming scared. Okay, so for driving, we're going to go through this just very quickly. With driving, I know they had some questions in the chat that we covered already. Yes, you went to the next slide. So we know that Alzheimer's will affect driving. Again, not everyone right in the beginning, but a lot of times some people will only drive locally where they're safe. They know someplace, sometimes at night they stop driving, but they become impacted their judgment, depth perception, their reaction time, and wandering. They are, again, if you can only do one thing at a time, think about driving, right? You're looking at the road, side view mirrors, the rear view mirror, a kid could be kicking a ball, lots going on. Someone with dementia, it is very difficult to watch many different things at once. Having trouble with lane control and all those things, and that likelihood of becoming lost is also really something significant that we need to pay attention to with driving. we could skip this slide, Esther. I just want to get on to, we'll cover a little bit about firearms. Well, let me see, there was a question, I think, in the chat about, I think, did we cover this? Referring to the DMV, we do encourage the officers to give citations, so there's a paper trail. But one thing we have to remember is if the person has memory problems, you could have taken their license away and they've forgotten that, right? So a lot of times it's really taking the keys and taking that vehicle out of sight, because they can, you could take their license away. The doctor could say that they can't drive. And if they've forgotten that, they may still want to drive, and that become very unsafe. So again, we have a whole program in our website just on driving. So with aggression, how do we help diffuse that? So people with Alzheimer's can be easily confused, as we said, and frightened. They're not normally violent. It's usually a reaction to being afraid, not recognizing something. They can be sick or injured and not verbally be able to tell us or describe that to us. So when they're confused or agitated, sometimes it could be looked at as they're intoxicated or drugged, and it could just be that they're confused and disoriented because of their dementia. Sometimes having someone else initiate interaction can diffuse the situation. Again, bringing them to a quiet area. Of course, we want to, if possible, avoid any physical restraints which can cause injury, and escalate the situation. Think about space. If somebody is confused or scared and all of a sudden 3 people come on them, approaching them by one person at a time rather than several people is definitely a better option. This way they're not feeling overpowered, okay? And there's a little bit of a space between talking to the person. Even if I was to do this with you in person, rather than being right in front of you, 2 inches away, even just to turn to the side and have them feel like they have some space, can be very comforting, right? So almost just, instead of looking, you're turning your bodies to the side and you're turning this way, and they have a little bit more of an out. Is a better approach. Again, we always want to make sure that you're alerted in your own safety. Of course, if you need to keep distance if someone becomes violent, you want to make sure you give yourself that distance as well. I know, as a few of you mentioned, that being police officers here, we want to make sure all of you are safe as well. But again, generally somebody is not violent. They just are fearful and scared, and they don't know what to do next. So your reassurance is going to be so important. Esther, do you want to cover the firearms, or I can cover it quickly if you'd like?
Do you want to do firearms, and then I'll start with the next one?
Sure, just with interest of time. So this is something I think we need to make sure we cover, because somebody with dementia, firearms should not be in the home. And we talk to families about this very often. Somebody who was in the military, was a police officer, was a hunter, maybe something that they haven't done in the past, and now all of a sudden becomes a new interest again to them. The other important part here, and this is hard to say, but sometimes the person may not recognize a loved one, and they could see a loved one as an intruder or a stranger in their own home, and that could lead to a very difficult situation. So we often will meet with families. Again, if you're in situations where you can meet with a family and mention to get rid of the firearms, talk to the local police, hand them in. I know I had a very difficult conversation once with somebody who believed he had the right to bear arms, and I understood that. His wife had Alzheimer's, and he used to put his loaded gun on the nightstand. And I had to talk to him about her being confused, not recognizing him possibly at night. That could be a very detrimental situation. So again, our helpline, we're happy to help have these conversations, but really important that someone with dementia can have extreme reactions to common events. TV, they could think that TV is happening really in their own neighborhood. It's that reality of what's real. They can misinterpret sounds and then not recognize a loved one. So again, firearms, we want to really discourage from having them in the house. Don, let's see if you would be interested. Thank you, Don, for putting that in the chat about the DMV. Great. Any questions? Okay. All right, Esther, I'll let you cover the neglect, and then we'll show some videos of some shelters that I think are great examples.
Okay. So some of the things to keep in mind as the disease progresses, the parts of the brain being destroyed, one of the areas is the part that helps us differentiate between what we think is happening and what really is or isn't. So sometimes people with the disease are not necessarily the most accurate reporters, but at the same time, people who are caring for them may be under tremendous amounts of stress, isolation, depression. And so their reporting of the difficulty of a situation may not always be any more accurate either. It's really, really easy for caregivers to get frustrated, to lose their patience. And at the same time, the person with dementia may be feeling very afraid, may be very anxious. They may be frustrated and intimidated by a caregiver. So you can see that things can lead to very, very emotional and disruptive situations very quickly, and it can be really hard to figure out what the real reality is, as opposed to the reality of the people experiencing the situation. But there are some concrete things that you can look for when you come across somebody with Alzheimer's or another dementia that may be more accurate reflections or signs of neglect. Some of the things to look for are things like dehydration or malnutrition, hypothermia, hyperthermia, lack of hygiene, if there's an unsafe living condition, sometimes inadequate or inappropriate clothing, but that's not always a sign of neglect. It may be that the person themselves doesn't recognize the appropriate clothing for the weather. And, rather than arguing about something, caregivers may just say, you know what, as long as they're not overly hot or overly cold, it may be acceptable to wear something just to help the person stay calm. So again, we've just got a quick video, not Hollywood acting. There are not going to be any awards for the performances here, but just gives some ideas as to the kinds of things to look for.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Officer Roberts. How you doing today?
I'm fine. Would you like to come in?
Sure. I just want to make sure you're okay. Is everything all right here?
No. I think someone came in here and stole my purse.
What does it look like?
It's black, and someone took it.
Is that your purse?
Yes, it's back.
You know, it's pretty cold in here. Is your furnace working?
I don't know.
Is there any food in the house?
Well, I don't want to eat right now. I'm not hungry now.
No, maybe we should talk to a social worker.
Do you have to?
Yeah, I think it might be necessary.
Okay, so yeah, I remember why this is not great acting, but if you go and look at the pictures again, there were a lot of warning signs, even right here on this end screen. If you see a little sticky by the lights that say on and off, all the mail that's been piled up, the fact that the house is really cold, she's not sure if she's got heat, very evasive, answering the question if she's got food in the house just by saying, well, I'm not hungry, really reflecting and just trying to not draw attention, missing the purse when it really was sitting right there, accusing somebody of having taken it. So there are definitely some concerning warning signs here. Oh, let's see. All right, so if you come across situations of potential neglect and abuse, what are things you can do? There are a few things. You can try to connect with the person's family if it's somebody you know or you have access to records. as to who may be in the area, or even if not, having a phone conversation with some of the concerns. Most towns will have a social services department, state adult protective services. There may also be some folks with CERT who can give you some advice as to who local contacts would be. And it doesn't have to be, really strong evidence of something. Sometimes just a concern can be enough to get somebody involved for the safety and the well-being of your constituents. Okay, Carolyn, you want to do disaster and fire?
Okay, so with fire and safety risk, again, we do know, we mentioned judgment. So some of this we see instances where people don't remember to turn the stove off, even running hot water in the tubs, not shutting that off, cooking unsafely, with long sleeves, things like that. So people with dementia are susceptible to at-home fires due to the memory loss and their poor judgment. The dementia impairs, again, it's over time. We mentioned earlier, this is a progressive illness, right? So it does progress and does get worse. Memory does get worse. Problem solving becomes worse. Reaction time, even, how long to do the microwave, or how to use the stove, multitasks, things like that. Increased risk for kitchen fires and fires related to smoking. We've even had people who haven't smoked in years, and now in their dementia, they want to smoke again, right? They're back in a time when they want to smoke again. So tools and devices designed for safe cooking often become a hazard. So there's different things you can do. Again, we have a whole safety at home list, how to keep each room of the home safe. Also, one of the other things is products. If you think about our cleaning products, a lot of times they have lemons on them, or they look like they could be Gatorade. And the person with dementia, if they have a problem with smell or taste, can ingest something that can be poisonous. So again, really looking at all of those different things can be very dangerous. So again, however we can help looking at those safety issues. So we're going to show you a film, and I want you to pay attention to a couple of things that really happen here that make a significant difference in time.
I know there's a fire in the building, but my husband, he won't leave.
Okay, well, we have to go to the second floor, ma'am, for the fire.
He has Alzheimer's and he won't go.
All right, is there anything special he likes to do, or anybody he likes to spend time with?
Well, he loves his grandson.
What's the boy's name?
David!
Okay, you go with this firefighter, I'll go bring him out. Mr. Marks? Sir, I'm with the fire department. We need to get you out of the building. Sir? Sir, your grandson. He's outside.
David?
Yes, David.
Where?
Outside. Come with me. I'll help you find him.
Hello, David? Oh, I'm okay. I love you too.
Okay, so just a couple of things again to notice here is this is a gentleman who was not aware of the sound. There's a word called agnosia. It's not recognizing a person, a sound, or an item. So someone with dementia may not recognize someone's face. They may not recognize, like, what does this pen do, right? Or even a sound. So the smoke detector, the alarms were going off, didn't recognize what that meant any longer. So the key here was so important that the firefighter knew his grandson, David. So again, that's that connection. Without that information, it might have took a lot longer to get him to leave that fire. Okay, and we're going to see again. So dementia, sensitive to trauma, limited ability to understand direction. They may forget the directions. They could be easily agitated and overwhelmed, and prone to hide. Again, how do we help with responding? So some things to consider. The person with dementia may have that delayed or no response to your question, almost like that flat affect that gentleman showed. Trouble following those directions, become easily agitated. They may repeat questions or statements, or you may need to repeat the answer several times over and over what you need them to do. So arrive without, again, I know we have some officers on the call today, but again, if you can arrive without lights and sirens if possible, because that noise can be scary and overwhelming. Enter the home with a calm, warm demeanor. using those good communication tips, eye contact, speaking slowly, and looking for the feelings behind the words of behavior, and knowing anything that you can know about the person to get that connection, like the grandson, David. The person, again, so let's skip to the next video on the disaster and the emergency shelter.
Mickey, what? This is not. No, I can't find my keys.
Mickey, you're okay.
I can't find my keys.
We'll find
Someone took my keys.
Hi, Mickey, folks. We will find it.
How's it going?
Well, my husband, he is not used to being away from home. He doesn't know why we are here and why we had to leave.
Okay, what's his name?
His name is Mickey.
Hi, Mickey. I'm Joe. I'm a paramedic. And I'm glad that you're here. You're safe here. And actually, we could use your help. Could you help us?
Yeah, sure. Come on, sure.
Right this way.
So some key points here is, again, this man had no idea why he had to be in a shelter, right? Someone with dementia, there may be an earthquake. They know they had to leave their house. He forgot that whole information, forgot that whole day. So the paramedic, again, bent down, eye contact, introduced himself, gave him his name, and gave him a job to do. Much better scenario than if he had not done those communication techniques. So I think that's really important. Again, knowing that the person may not know why they're there. And I love the fact that he said, you know, you're safe here. You're safe with me. Those words, safety, reassurance, are so important. Again, just remembering those talk tactics. Take it slow, simple questions, one thing at a time, limit the reality checks, keeping eye contact. There was a question, Patrick, in the chat. Can Alzheimer's affect your taste or smell? Yeah, so our brain allows us to do all of those things, right? So depending on where the neurons have died in the brain, it can affect smell and taste. So we often notice that the sweet taste sensation is still very apparent. So a lot of times to help somebody eat, if their diet allows, some people will put maple syrup on the French fries or whatever it is to get them to eat other foods. But we do have to be careful. I had someone, for example, there was a CNA that was caring for someone in their home. She knocked on the door and the person answered the door like that. And she thought she had a stroke. And she had brushed her teeth with Bengay. So again, it could look very similar to toothpaste, didn't recognize the taste. And again, thank God she was okay. But I also had a scenario where somebody was, the mother came over to the house. The daughter was cleaning, I'm sorry, and left Comet on the sink. And the mother thought that was grated cheese. Didn't smell the difference and almost ate the Comet. So again, really being careful. So it can affect taste and smell just because it affects our brain. Okay. And we're going to end. I know we have about 10 minutes left, Esther, so we'll kind of share our services and how to help families.
Okay, so I want to make sure that everybody is familiar with who we are and what we do. All of our services that we offer are free for the public. And one of the most important things we offer is our 24-hour helpline. So you can see the number here. It's on all of our materials, every web page, everywhere you go and you see Alzheimer's Association, you're going to see this number. It's 800-272-3900. Mostly staffed by master's level clinicians at, are bilingual. And we also have a translation service that is available in over 200 languages. Somebody once asked me what the hours are for the helpline, and so I reiterated it is 24/7, 365 days a year. Any question can be asked by any person. It could be, you know, an hour after this program, you say, oh, you know, I had this question I meant to ask. You can call the helpline and ask any question you want. If you have a concern about yourself or about a family member or somebody you came across in the community, doesn't matter. A medical professional can call, a police officer can call, anybody, any question. We have lots of education available through our website, alz.org. We have programs, some are pre-recorded on the website, so you can watch anytime. We have programs out in the communities, in libraries and churches and synagogues and men's club and women's club and YMCAs, as well as some that are hosted virtually. So there's a program happening no matter where you are. And I know we've got lots of people from across the country today. So no matter where you are, please reach out to your local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, either through alz.org or the Community Resource Finder is how people can connect with local service providers, whether you're looking for an elder care attorney or a geriatrician or a support group, or more of these education programs. The Community Resource Finder is there to help you connect with people and resources that you may need. So Carolyn mentioned earlier the Bring Me Back Home program, which was developed with the state of Connecticut State Police, keeping in mind, as we shared earlier, 6 out of 10 people with dementia will wander. It's not might, they will. And so we always want people to be prepared before something happens. The Bring Me Back Home registry is a way to be proactive about gathering information and having it on file with the Connecticut State Police prior to there being an emergency situation. A little while ago, Carolyn talked about how urgent it is that wandering situations be reported immediately. Time is absolutely of the essence. And so what this registry does is it allows you to gather information about a loved one, submit it to the state police. It can only be accessed during the report of somebody missing or wandering. And so if you've got your cell phone out and you want to take that QR code, you can do that, or at ct.gov/BMBH for Bring Me Back Home. So we talked about the 24-hour helpline, the website with information, and also the Community Resource Finder. I'm sorry, some of these videos just play automatically without me asking for them to. So we are a voluntary organization. Much of what we do is done through our thousands of amazing volunteers here in Connecticut and all across the country. So very briefly, I just want to share some of the different ways that people can get involved with the association. We have volunteers who help with some of our fundraising, who help with organizing the walks, who help with our community education programs, or represent the association at tabling events, whether they're health fairs or community festivals. We are out and about anywhere and everywhere, and so it takes all of our volunteers to help make our presence known in the community. We are involved with advocacy, so people who help advocate for the rights and the needs of people living with Alzheimer's and for their caregivers. We do things on a local, state, and national level, and we're always looking for more people who want to volunteer. No knowledge, understanding, or patience with the political system are necessary to be an advocate. Just a matter of sharing information. Trial match, we had a couple slides earlier talking about research and how we are going to put an end to this disease. And we know that it takes all of us to do what we can. And there are many, many different ways to help. Trial match is one of the many ways that people can help. It's like a match.com, but for trials, and not just clinical trials involving medication. There are all kinds of studies that may even look at family history. They may look at healthy brains over time. I and a couple of other folks in the Connecticut chapter actually participate in a few studies. We are fortunate to live not too far away from Yale University, which is doing amazing research studies. I participate in a couple down there. I also participate in one that's just an online quarterly. I get an email that says it's time for your card playing games, and it's really about a memory thing. it shows you playing cards, and have you seen this one before, or is this the same as the one before or after or whatnot. It takes about 20 minutes a couple times a year. I figure that's a pretty simple thing that I can do to try to make a difference at the end of the day. Walk to End Alzheimer's. I shared the picture of Mark at our first walk. It's a really wonderful day. There are more than 600 walks across the country. So no matter where you are, there's a walk nearby. We would love to have you join us, whether you want to help plan a walk, you want to be involved with organizing it, you want to come that day and be surrounded by people who may be on a similar journey as you, or one very different, but you just want to be with people. It's just a really powerful, supportive experience. So we would love to have you come join us. And then we also have the Longest Day, which is another signature fundraising opportunity to honor caregivers on the summer solstice, but really every day, knowing how much work it is and how hard it is to provide care 24 hours a day to somebody with Alzheimer's. So, according to my clock, it's 8:59. Carolyn, we have 1 minute.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for your attention. I hope that you learned a lot of different things today. We tried to cover, different scenarios and different trainings that we put together kind of in one session tonight. So thank you for all that you do. If there's any last minute questions, or Michael, is there anything you wanted to share?
No, I just wanted to thank you both for this fantastic presentation, all the examples, all of the medical background that you gave in the beginning was fantastic. I just had one question, possibly for the group that we have that's probably come across our minds. Is you showed some examples of the fire department coming in or the paramedics coming in. We would have CERT members that would be working with individuals with Alzheimer's in a shelter situation, which can be confusing for everybody involved. Do you have like a top 3 list of objectives that we're trying to work with these individuals during this stressful time, not just for the individual with Alzheimer's, but others and family and the unknown?
The things, Michael, you asked like what we would suggest to do.
Yeah.
So I think giving them a job to do, like giving them an activity to keep them engaged. Again, if they're not understanding why they're there, not recognizing the location, just as that gentleman showed, he's helping them make sandwiches. So keep that person engaged in an activity. Don't assume that they can be by themselves, right? Make sure that they're with somebody at all times, because they can become fearful and hide. So I think I would say using reassurance, giving them the name, giving them a job to do, and not letting them be alone.
Okay.
If I can add one more, I would say have everybody attend our Communicating Effectively education program. It's an hour, and we go through each of the stages of the disease and talk much more in depth about how the disease changes the brain and different communication suggestions for different stages.
So that might be a session we can present at CERT Saturday.
That's exactly what Carolyn and I talked about earlier today.
Okay.
Really focusing on the communication piece and the scenarios, and if someone says this, how to answer that question. I think the communication strategies, how to effectively communicate with somebody to de-escalate some behaviors and help them feel important. There's an exit sign. Someone may not know that's an exit sign, that they can't read the written word. So then what do we need to do for them? Sometimes using pictures and things like that. So I think definitely diving into more of communication would be helpful.
All right. I'll talk to you offline on scheduling and how much time you'll need. But it's going to be a fantastic conference, and we're looking forward to having you both back. And I can't thank you enough for presenting tonight in the evening for a live presentation.
Thank you for your concern with this topic, and thank you for all the work that you do and the difference that you all make each and every day.
It's not me; it's all the people on the screen.
It's everybody. Yeah.
Oversee this. So, just a reminder for everyone online. Thank you so much for spending a couple hours of your Wednesday evening with us. Like I said, this webinar is recorded and will be produced into a package video and will be posted on our YouTube channel, our brand new CERT YouTube channel for Connecticut. If you would like a certificate for attending this webinar, please go back to your CT Train account, fill out the eval. I will share the results and comments with our guest speakers tonight so that they can, refresh anything or give themselves a pat on the back for a job well done. And once you complete your eval, your completion certificate for the webinar will be available. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Yeah.
Michael, I just wanted to mention, someone had a question in the chat quickly now about Down syndrome. Absolutely, we do. We actually just did a podcast about Down syndrome and dementia. So you feel free to call our helpline. We do have topic sheets. We know that individuals with Down syndrome are at a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease as they age. So absolutely, we have information on that and can help support you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight's webinar.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks for having us.